Whenever you're ready, Martha.
I am ready. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for being here. We're happy to start off the conference. You can go to the next slide, Susan. I'm Martha Aitken with the Metropolitan Center for Applied Research and Extension. This was definitely a team project, and so I'd like to introduce my co-presenters and the extension units we present. This is our entire team here on the slide. So we established the Metro Center, just to tell you a little bit about our units, in 2015 to increase the extension's capacity in urban areas. The Metro Center is solely project driven. Our projects are extramurally funded, and we work across a variety of subject areas by assembling a unique team of experts for each project. Two of those experts, Susan Hord and Brian Anderson, are with the Division of Governmental Studies and Services. DGSS is a research and outreach unit which has provided high quality applied social science research to tribes, federal, state, and local government agencies in the Pacific Northwest for over 55 years. Trevor Lane, another one of our experts, in addition to being the director of Ferry County Extension, works as a statewide specialist in small businesses and entrepreneurship. We also work very closely with Mayor Barb Tolbert of Arlington, other city staff, and the Stille Valley Chamber of Commerce. But before we start about sharing our current project, we think it's important to talk a bit about our history with Arlington. I'll turn it over to Brian.
All right, so this history lays the foundation for the current activities that we're going to be talking about. Going back a little bit, in March 22nd, 2014, a landslide took 23 lives and destroyed almost 50 homes. This was the deadliest natural landslide in US history, actually. And the then WSU President Nelson Floyd asked Extension to be a leader and help these communities recover from this natural disaster. And it led to a lot of different activities in a lot of different areas. Beyond just the immediate disaster response, there was K-12 summer programs, student interns went, broadband access, tuition waivers, and working with the Governor's Landslide Commission to help support this community recover. Next slide, please. A year later, Arlington was again involved in a different effort, which was America's Best Communities competition, and the Metro Center provided leadership during this competition. It started with 135 communities, developing a community revitalization plan, and Arlington ended up being one of 8 finalists competing for funding. And again, there was a broad array of different activities and areas that were worked on, in resilience and sustainability to infrastructure. You can see the others there on that slide. Next, please. This quote here from the mayor of Arlington kind of captures really well the impact of Extension in this time, this hard time for this community after the landslide. And as a result of the efforts of WSU in this community, there was more than 1.4 million in external funding was secured, and 2/3 of that went directly to the community. And all of these efforts were detailed in this long-term recovery report. The link there is at the bottom of the slide. And as a result of these efforts, the team won the 2015 NACDEP Excellence in Teamwork Award. Next slide, please. This brings us to a year ago. 6 years and 1 day after the landslide, Governor Inslee issued the stay-at-home order. And it shuttered all but essential businesses. And soon after that, the mayor of Arlington contacted the Metro Center based on our prior work with the community and asked for their help to help the downtown businesses survive the pandemic economically. And due to the foundation of our previous work, we were able to get this work done really quickly. And it shows the importance of building these relationships over time. And the plan was to create an environment for the businesses to be able to innovate and meet the challenges of the pandemic. And the initial first step that was decided on was to conduct a business needs assessment. And that will be detailed by my colleague, Dr. Susan Hord.
All right, I'll go through the needs assessment survey that we conducted. The idea behind the survey, we didn't have a lot of time to get a survey out. It was really about, how has COVID impacted you? What are your needs? What have you done to deal with the impact of COVID? What would help you deal with the impact of COVID? And as part of that, we did a lot of research and community surveys done elsewhere and programs done elsewhere to help clarify survey questions. The overall results of the survey, 31 businesses responded. That turns out to be about 25% of our total total response rate, which is actually pretty high for surveys right now, especially in this environment. Most businesses that responded were retail. So we had 9 retail businesses, about 30% of our total sample. As we know, retail's been hit particularly hard by this pandemic. We asked about reopening challenges because at that time there was reopening was going on. The orders were becoming more flexible for certain counties. And so some of the reopening challenges that the businesses stated they had was reconfiguring their floor space to meet the guidelines, adapting their business models in a COVID environment. We asked them about their training preferences, and we'll go into those in particular more in depth because it helped solidify programs later for the city to help the downtown businesses in Arlington. Training preferences, there were differences based on revenue and size of business for what they needed. So we'll talk about that more, but there was need for social media marketing. How do you transition your advertisement to primarily social media? Website design, how do you attract new customers? So we'll talk about the training preferences more in depth. We did ask, have they recovered from COVID at that time? And not, unsurprisingly, 55% of the businesses said no, they had not. 35% said yes, that they had. 10% said they had no impact. COVID had no impact on their business. So going more into the reopening challenges faced by businesses, this is just an overall percentage of what businesses said their challenges were. So some of those challenges, as I said, reconfiguring the space sales floor, 36% of businesses said that was a real challenge of reopening. 32% said adapting their business model. 29% adopting online ordering platforms was a struggle. Some indicated they had issues communicating now with their traditional customers, not even just attracting new customers, even their traditional customer base they were having difficulties communicating with. So these are some of the challenges that they were facing. We asked them about what training and technical assistance would you be interested in to help overcome some of these issues. Social media marketing was by far the most popular training choice. A lot of businesses said we really need social media marketing. Website design, attracting new customers, applying for loans and grants. Even in this environment, a lot of businesses said, with loans and grants being available, we need help applying for those loans and grants. Some businesses indicated business planning. But social media marketing, online sales, and attracting customers were predominantly needed by businesses. Training needs for business, we did find that training needs, there were differences based on total revenue. Based on our sample, we divided revenue between businesses that made less than $50,000 and businesses that made over $50,000 a year. So as you can see, actually, there are differences based on revenue. Attracting new customers, those businesses whose revenue was less than 50,000 said they need a lot more of them said we need help attracting new customers. They also said overwhelmingly they need more help with website design, social media marketing, applying for loans and grants. So a lot of these, and this makes sense because Arlington downtown has a lot of small business. So small businesses are struggling more with these things. So providing training in these areas will particularly help small businesses. And I will go ahead and let you take over, Martha.
Thanks, Susan. So Brian mentioned that we wanted to help create an environment where businesses could innovate rapidly, but what we found was that a lot of these downtown businesses were really just hunkering down to wait until the pandemic was over. Additionally, once we get the survey results back, the mayor realized that we were heading toward a pretty potentially disastrous fourth quarter. So she wanted us to refocus our energy on how we could help downtown get through the holidays, and the city would take a little more of a leadership role than they had anticipated. So restaurants in downtown Arlington hadn't really adopted outdoor dining yet, so we worked with them to create the Arlington Outdoor Eatery. And they took advantage of a beautiful park at the end of downtown. They strung lights, added picnic tables, piped in music, got heaters, and they didn't try to over-organize logistics. So customers contacted the restaurants directly, and each restaurant decided if they would do delivery or just pick up. Next slide, please, Susan. Next, with a small team from downtown businesses and the city, we looked at every harvest and holiday event to see how it could be reinvented within the COVID environment. And I'm sure that was something that your communities did as well. But downtown Arlington was just convinced that their business was reliant on these events. So we tried to figure out how we could recreate them and connect them. Our team provided a lot of that creative push, and we also did a lot of the graphic work to promote them. Next one, Susan, thank you. So based on our survey results, we also tried to figure out how we could help businesses sell online in a very short period of time. And what we found was the Support Local platform was created by a Seattle company, and it's a customizable turnkey marketplace that was designed to connect groups of small businesses. So it's not a sales platform. So businesses keep 100% of the sales themselves. The city contracted with Support Local for a year so that businesses could join the site at no charge. And then the Stille Valley Chamber of Commerce stepped up to administer the site, recruit businesses, and help them get their products loaded. Next slide, please. So this is what you see when you go to shoplocalarlington.com's homepage. The products on the homepage rotate each time you go through, go to the site, or if you refresh. Next slide. When you find an item you like, you click on it and you get to a product page. And the business then determines how to conduct the sale. So if they have online sales already, there's a Buy Now button that links to that product on the business's existing website, like it does for that cinnamon roll there. And if you don't do online sales, there's the button that says email a purchase request. It pops up an email message and you can connect directly with the vendor. It's a little awkward, but bit by bit, the chamber has been coaching businesses about how they can make online transactions so they can avoid that two-step sales process. But that really allowed everybody to go online, even if they didn't have a website. Next slide. Restaurants have a special page on the site, and there's also a place for service providers who are local, such as personal trainers. Next slide. And each business has its individual landing page with the featured products. There's our friend the cinnamon roll again. Next slide, please. So the site launched at the beginning of November with a social media blitz. Arlington works with a marketing company, and they made a series of videos that they posted on the Arlington Awaits Facebook page that they manage for the city. And if you visit that page, you can see the videos, including this really nice introductory video about the site. On the right in the photo is Mandy Kruger. She's the CEO of the Stille Valley Chamber. And on the left is Portia Smith. Now, Portia is a social media influencer, and she was a key part of our strategy for this website. Next slide, please. So our goal with the website was to increase sales, but also to build business skills based on what we learned from the survey. So we engaged Portia and her social media portfolio to cross-promote the site. The one thing she did was curate gift guides from products she saw on the website. She posted them on her social media and linked them to the Shop Local Arlington website, where they were also highlighted. But perhaps the most important thing that Portia did was she coached 75% of the businesses on the site about their product selection and how they can use their own social media to increase visibility and sales. Next slide, please. It's been tough to really gauge the success of Shop Local Arlington just by the numbers. The number of businesses increased from 54 when it went live to 118 now. You can see our metrics from the first months of operation. We didn't know if that was good or not, but apparently the people at Support Local said that our ratio of visitors to click-throughs was one of the best they had seen. In the stats from February, you can see that visitors went down after the holidays, and that's kind of what we expected. But monthly impressions is another way to gauge success, as it indicates how many times the content was seen by web or social media users, and it indicates brand awareness. We found that new videos and product giveaways selected by Portia will definitely boost the impressions in a given month. So you can see in February they were fairly high, but even at 11,000 in April, that's considered fairly good. And potentially these impressions prompted in-person shopping or direct visits to the business's website. So because no actual sales transpire on the website, it's really impossible for us to know how much at all the website may have increased sales. We do know, however, that the Arlington sales tax revenues increased by 11.9% in 2020 over 2019. And we certainly can't attribute this to our efforts, and Arlington has more businesses than just this downtown, but we thought it was a pretty interesting statistic. So now that the website has been live for about 6 months, we may do a follow-up survey and see what more we can learn. But I guess one of the measures of success I want to mention is that the Stille Valley Chamber sees the website as a way to build their own organizational capacity and their ability to serve the community. So by charging a small fee to businesses next year, they can make the site financially sustainable, and they'll offer social media and coaching packages to their members to help build those skills. And Trevor, I'll pass this along to you to finish up for us.
Thanks, Martha. So pulling this project together and just kind of highlighting how we got where we are, we turned to our resources. You know, what does that mean? Well, we talked to other faculty. We looked at other projects that were previously existing programs. And we also looked over the research from other recovery or resilience publications. Through that, we put together a group that's worked together for quite some time. Then we moved into the best practices, and that included organizing as a team with regular recurring meetings, designating a leader for the various projects. We had to break this thing out into multiple components, and each one of us took a leadership role in those components. And then we looked at the impacts from other projects. Organizational change premises, like knowing when or how to pivot. There were a couple of times we were headed in a direction as social scientists and researchers, and we had to back up from our approach to go, oh, wait, that's not what the data is telling us. And we worked with the mayor and some other leaders, community leaders and consultants, to pull this thing together in a way that made sense for the community and not necessarily what we were wanting to drive. We also worked with several subject matter experts that were external to the university, and we've also worked with elected officials in the chambers of commerce. And at the end of the day, we use data to drive our decisions. So those surveys, those first round of surveys, were critical in helping us identify the needs, challenges, and opportunities that existed as we paved a path forward to help foster small business ecosystems on Main Street for Arlington. And that's kind of the 30,000-foot view of how we pulled this all together to step through it all. Next slide, please. And on that note, we want to thank all of you for attending. I do believe we have time for questions and answers. Nope, running out of time.
This is like 1 minute left. I'm not sure if Gary's on yet. Okay. Any questions in the 1 minute? All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop the share. And then is Gary on or the co-host on? Okay, well, I guess we'll just transition into the next presentation, and we have presenter Shannon Rogers from University of New Hampshire, and the title of her presentation is Conducting Economic Impact Studies in the Era of COVID. So I will turn it over to Shannon. And I'll keep time and let you know in the chat how much time you have left. So
awesome. Thank you, Susan. Can everyone hear me okay? Hopefully. I'm going to introduce my colleagues as well, Casey Porter and Charlie French, also from the University of New Hampshire Cooperative Extension. So nice to see you all this morning. I'm going to go ahead and try to share my screen. That was so seamless last time. I hope it goes nice for. All right. And let's pop this into presenter. Slideshow. Everyone just seeing the main slides? Very good. Great. Thank you. All right. So this is not what it looks like in New Hampshire today. It is a beautiful spring day, but it wasn't too long ago that we were out on some rail trails doing economic analysis research in the winter. And I'm going to tell you a story about how we've kind of pivoted, like everyone, in this challenging time to kind of keep our economic analysis research going. We have a contract to look at the economic impact of New Hampshire's state-owned rail trails, and this is with our Department of Transportation at the state level. So New Hampshire, probably not as well known for its rail trails as other states, but we have some, and we're trying, to get a better understanding of them. They're definitely an understudied asset in our communities across the state. We have over 500 miles of them. A recent rail trails plan was commissioned by our Senate in the state. And this was because the last one was completed about 20 years ago. So we officially got started with that contract in February 2020. So everyone knows what happened the next month. We had gotten out for a few weeks and then we were hit, with our stay-at-home orders. But just a quick reminder of, why we're even looking at this spending and economic impact and why we're trying to do it in person. So some folks may know this is kind of your basic equation for estimating economic impact of visitors. And, over here we have data from our partners that are trail groups, regional planning commissions, who are telling us, how many visitors are coming on average during different seasons. We're doing this throughout the year to get that different seasonality. We have all 4 in New Hampshire. And then this middle piece is really where we're trying to understand in person how much people are averaging when they're coming to the trail for that main purpose of visiting the trail. And that's best done, if possible, in person, doing intercept surveys, talking in close proximity to a visitor to the trail, asking them how many people are in their group, what they're spending on, the different categories of spending. And then we use that with InPlan, or you can use other economic modeling software to estimate the multipliers for different sectors and kind of get that ripple effect from spending. So this middle piece, we were so excited back in February 2020 to be able to get out in person and talk to people about their spending at trails. But like I said, this has impacted, the pandemic has impacted our efforts to do these in-person surveys and to also understand economic impacts. Very odd economic time, right? With many stay-at-home orders and only essential businesses being allowed to be open for quite a while. So we did get a 1-year extension on the research. We also tried other methods because in addition to our stay-at-home orders in New Hampshire, we also had particular requirements from the university in terms of what was allowed for research. And the protocols at UNH have been very strict, but also I think very successful in keeping people healthy and safe. So we did, back in the spring of 2020, try an online survey, which we sent out to our partners at regional planning commissions and trail clubs and groups across the state. That was actually too successful. We got several thousand responses with a lot of variability in our data in terms of the amount of spending people were claiming that to have done at the trail. So unfortunately, a lot of that data was not useful. So like I said, luckily we're able to get a 1-year extension. We're back at it. We started again in February 2021 and are in person on the trails. And I'm going to pass it along to my colleague, Casey, to share how we went back out onto the trails safely.
Thanks, Shannon. Good morning, everyone. So really our goal, kind of fast forward to January of 2021, we came back and really wanted to get back out in the field with some in-person data collection. But we really wanted to prioritize our safety, our community's safety, and be sure to follow our university's COVID-19 protocols. So after some brainstorming, we were able to come up with this modified intercept survey approach where we created these signs, these sandwich board signs like the one that you see in this photo. And each sign, we have different signs for each trail that each have a unique QR code. So we're keeping those separate in order to ensure that those survey responses are actually coming from trail users. And we're sending surveyors out into the field to observe and encourage trail users to complete the survey from a distance. So we felt like if we had just dropped off the signs, we didn't think we'd get a great response, but wanted to be able to maintain social distance and not have people talking directly next to each other to complete these surveys. So we've been doing this now in the field since February of 2021. The trail users, we're sure to remind them that they need to complete the survey the same day that they visit the trail. But overall, it's been going really well. Super nice to be out in the community and interacting with others after a very long time of working from home alone. And a really nice perk of this work is also being able to bring my dog out into the field. This is my dog, Willow. We have another research question for this project, which is, does bringing a dog along on the trail increase your survey response? So we're still investigating that, but I think in some cases it might. Next slide, please. And here is a photo of one of our interns, Shay, out on the trail. The surveyors team included myself and Shannon. We were primarily doing field work at the beginning to test the protocols and pilot it, make sure everything was working okay and we felt safe. And then we brought on a couple of student interns, Shay and Liam, to do the bulk of the surveying work. And when the surveyors are going out to the trail, they're prepared with the toolkit, which includes these sandwich board signs. We have some yard signs also that we can stake into the ground. We have postcards like the one that you see in the photo. So if people want to learn more about the research or contact us, we can give them that. We also bring clipboards, pens, and paper surveys in case people don't have a smartphone or just don't want to complete the survey online. That's fine, they can do it on paper. And then we're sure to always have extra masks, wipes, hand sanitizer, the whole 9 yards that we're used to at this time. And so we've been successfully implementing this on 6 trails across the state. And I'll say, you know, some collection days are better than others. Sometimes I'd say the majority of people that we run into are respectful, are willing to take the survey, responsive. Most of them are regular trail users, or most of the ones that I've come into contact with seem to be regular trail users that are really interested in this research and are really glad to hear that we're doing this research because they value the trails so much and they want them to be taken care of and maintained. There's other people that are less interested in talking to us and completing the surveys as well. It's not rainbows and sunshine every day. Some people are just out, you know, exercising on the trail and might not even respond to a hello, and that's okay. Next slide, please. So we wanted to share some best practices and protocols that we have come up with. These are what we share with our students. So I'll just highlight a few of these. So the first one and most important one is that we as staff, as well as students, before we go into the field, we're making sure that our Wildcat Pass is up to date and valid. We were really lucky that our university was able to develop a COVID testing protocol and develop their own lab that has a really quick turnaround time on COVID tests. So students are tested twice weekly. Staff are tested once weekly in order to keep the Wildcat Pass up to date and valid. And this is something that was really key, I think, to the success of this project, was wanting to feel like we were safe in the field, as well as keeping our community and the people that we're interacting with safe as well. Another kind of hurdle that we needed to overcome to do this work was just figuring out the safety of everyone. Normally we have students going out into the field in pairs, and so wanted to make sure that they felt safe, so we're encouraging them to let a friend or relative know where they're going, if they feel comfortable to share their location, and they're always in contact with Shannon, giving her updates and letting her know, so we can kind of keep tabs on where people are and when they're going and coming. Okay, next slide, please. And then again, safety is key. So making sure that surveyors are comfortable, they're wearing their mask. We've stressed with the students, don't feel pressured to interact with somebody if you don't want to, if you don't feel safe and comfortable doing so. We do have masks that we will give out to people if they're not wearing one, they want to have a longer conversation. But otherwise, we're just directing people to the sign, or we've had a lot of success actually leaving postcards on car windshields, maybe when we don't see somebody on the trail, but just see a bunch of cars. We keep track of the number of postcards that we've distributed, and we can then kind of look at how many survey responses we got on that day. And it's pretty good, the number that are looking at those postcards and then completing the survey, I think. Next slide, please. So some key takeaways. I think that we found that this approach is really helpful to have a surveyor there doing that observation and encouraging. I don't think that we would get near as many survey results just from having the sandwich boards out there. And we kind of knew that. And so this was how we decided to stay safe, be, respectful of social distancing without compromising our survey responses. So the weather has provided some good opportunities for data collection. This past winter, we got a lot more snow than actually in 2020. So it was good to be able to get some data from snowmobilers, cross-country skiers, but also challenging in the sense that we were out there doing surveying on really cold, bitter, windy days just because we had kind of scheduled it out that way. And so sometimes we didn't see trail users for a long time. So our surveyors, we've been very flexible and adaptable. The trails that we're visiting have parking lots right next to the trailhead, so it's easy to pop into your car to warm up. Another thing that I've been experimenting with is, instead of just staying at the trailhead, to actually walk the trail a little bit, because the trails that we are surveying on, there's many exit and entry points. So that's a good way to get more survey responses as well. And I'll pass it to you, Shannon.
Great, thanks, Casey. Yeah, and so I know we only probably have about 5 minutes left. Sorry, I can't see the comments in the way I have it set up, but I saw it just flash and at my time. But initially, we'd kind of hoped to, and Charlie at the end has a couple of discussion questions to hear from anybody else who might be working on economic impact studies. So we have our emails at the end if anyone wants to connect. I know there's been a lot of research on, economic impacts of COVID, but this study was not related to COVID, just got impacted itself by COVID. So maybe we'll have a few minutes to go over those, but just really quickly, these other takeaways. Casey spoke nicely about how it's been really nice to be back out in connecting with folks doing this work in person in our communities. And then we're finding that many people are, following the protocols and being respectful. And we're also already seeing this spring that as more folks are getting vaccinated, we are finding our spring data collection to be even easier. Prior to our new protocol, we had used an iPad. Folks weren't as comfortable with that, understandably. I'm sorry, there's a train going by the window in my office, but it's already been, people are willing to try out that iPad in the spring, which is great, which helps us get those responses day of. And then just really quickly, here's some progress to date. I know it may not look like a lot. It's really great compared to our last winter, and we're very happy. You know, we're well on our way. We have 3 more seasons left of data collection. We're hoping to get about 500 responses before the end of the year. But really wanted to emphasize that it does, like Casey said, it takes effort to get these responses. If you're, you know, at a trailhead for several hours, you might only get a few responses. So we're super appreciative of our interns and their tenacity. And just, you know, excited to be able to speak to kind of these economic impacts of the rail trails in New Hampshire and share that with our decision makers. So just some really quick acknowledgements. We also, Casey and I wrote a blog on this topic if anyone's interested to see some of this summarized. And like I said, our emails are here. And I'll just pass it to Charlie in case it looks like maybe we have 2 to 3 minutes left. I don't know if we can have any type of discussion, but
You actually have about 5 minutes left, exactly.
awesome.
Okay.
Okay.
Good. All
Thank
right. Good
you.
morning, everyone. Thank you, Shannon. Actually, just because we have such limited time left, I think I'll go to some of the questions that were written out in the chat. One of the questions from Bridget Tuck is, does your survey questionnaire ask anything about how the respondents' behavior might be different due to COVID-19, for example, going straight home after versus visiting a local restaurant?
Yes, thank you, Bridget. Great question. Yes, so we did add one question about whether they're spending, it comes right after that spending table, and we asked if this was different in COVID. I'm sorry, the exact wording is failing me at the moment, but we did ask a question if it changed or if it seemed different in the COVID era. Yep, absolutely. And there's also a place at the end for folks to write comments as well. And we've gotten a few of those responses.
Right, and also Shannon and Casey, folks want to know if you'd be willing to share the questionnaire, the sandwich board somehow.
Yeah, that's a good question. Yes, we can share it probably as a PDF would be easier to look at. Like Casey said, we've designed it in a way that each rail trail, the 6 that we have across the state as part of our sample, has its own unique QR code. So kind of going in and looking at that might generate kind of a false, you know, response that we'd be like, oh, that person didn't finish it. But we can definitely, if you email us, I'm sure we can share a PDF of the survey questions.
Great, and obviously conducting direct economic studies and research has been challenging this past year. Just curious, and using the function on the bottom, show of hands, are any of you working on or aware of economic studies that have had to be paused or adapted pretty significantly in the last year? So I see folks are raising their hands, definitely. And just curious, for those of you who've had to adapt, what are some considerations that you've had to build into your economic analyses and your field work in these strange economic times? And you can either use your chat box, or you're welcome to chime in as well. What are some ways that folks have had to adapt? And also because we have, oh, I'm sorry, I heard someone say something.
Oh, I was just going to share. Hi, everybody. We had a contract to do a kind of more of a visitor survey, visitor profile type work in one of our larger cities. And we had economic impact tacked onto that. And it was set to wrap up in spring of 2020. So that was the last season we were going to collect. So obviously we pulled that, no surveying in that season. And then we just used our 3 other seasons that we had, and then kind of based on hotel visits and stays, we were able to just extrapolate out to kind of get this is what your year would look like in terms of visitor economic impact, because they were just really trying to understand, you know, what is the total impact of visitors. So it's kind of how we worked our way around that one.
It's a creative workaround, Bridget, thank you. And someone else said that they had to delay a major mail survey for upcoming projects too. So. Other thoughts, ideas, and also want to open it up. I think we have about a minute left. If anyone has any general questions about the presentation, feel free to chime in.
Yeah, I'll just say really quickly too, Charlie, while folks are thinking that that's such a good point. Bridget, is great probably that you had that other data. You know, we were just getting started, and so we were lucky to get the 1-year extension. There was no appetite really for a 2-year extension. So it can be hard with, you know, we're doing the best we can, but we're going to have some checks with other studies that were done, you know, a few years prior that are similar in our geography and stuff. So yeah, it's an interesting time to be doing this work.
Definitely, and doubly interesting. We engaged students on a lot of this work, and that posed some of its own challenges, as we discussed briefly, but it also was very rewarding. And UNH is pretty advanced in our testing, and that was what made us able to do that. So.
Okay, we are officially at time, so we do need to transition to the other presentation. Thank you, that was great. Our next presentation is, the lead presenter is Jennifer Hawkins from the University of Minnesota, and the title is Using Data to Inform Program and Policy During COVID. So take it over, Jennifer.
Wonderful, wonderful. Yes, thank you so much. And I would like to introduce Bridget Tuck. She'll be joining me. She's a colleague at the University of Minnesota as well. And we work together on a project that we'll be sharing a little bit more about here over the next 20 minutes or so. So the topic of our presentation is using data to inform policy. And we were able to collaborate with some stakeholders in the city of Rochester and Olmsted County in southeastern Minnesota to really dive into some issues that businesses were facing through a survey process, and then they were able to use the findings to inform their policy and programming and help businesses navigate and survive the pandemic. So like everyone else, you know, March of last year was a real time of uncertainty for us and businesses in the region. Prior to the pandemic, we'd actually had some conversations with the Chamber of Commerce in Rochester about doing a business survey, and in March of 2020, our governor issued a stay-at-home order and really shut down our economy. This created a sense of urgency, and we quickly resumed those conversations with the Chamber of Commerce, as well as a few other partners that they brought into the conversation to start a survey series. So when we initially started talking about it, we were looking at doing it every month and ended up doing it about bi-monthly, a little less frequently than a monthly survey, but really accelerated our collaboration with them. So in addition to the Rochester Area Chamber of Commerce, we collaborated with the Olmsted County, so the chief financial officer for the county that Rochester is located in, and then READY is the Rochester Area Economic Development Incorporated, it's the economic development organization for the Rochester, Minnesota area. They were all involved with designing and disseminating the survey. So really we had a study team, Bridget, myself, and then a representative from each of those organizations involved with the creation of the study, and the partners disseminated it through their networks. So the goals or the project purpose was to assess the situation and the needs of firms in the Rochester area, and then to use that information to develop programming. So the chamber was developing programming, as well as county and Rochester Area Economic Development Incorporated, and then an opportunity to also advocate and adjust local policy in particular. There were some actions around deferring tax collection and that sort of thing. So this information was designed to help inform those decisions. So our general approach is probably not really a surprise to anyone. We did co-create that survey with our project partners. We were careful to align the questions with the census, the US Census Pulse survey, and the Minneapolis Federal Reserve was also doing a business survey. So neither of those surveys got it down to the city level. So we aligned the questions so that we could get more localized data, but also were able to benchmark it to those larger studies. So that was really helpful for us. As we started to analyze and share the results of this study. We did deploy it using Qualtrics, and it was distributed to all the members of those organizations, Rochester Area Economic Development and the Chamber of Commerce. And then we did a short summary analysis of each survey response with our project partners. We repeated steps 1 through 5. We're on our 5th survey now, so we did it 4 times. We did a survey in late May. We did another in early July, 1 in September, and then 1 in January of 2020. And we're doing the 5th and final survey right now. It's open and accepting responses as we speak. So we'll see what that has to tell us. And then we were able to share the findings of the first 3 surveys with the Chamber's annual meeting and in the Chamber of Commerce's magazine. And so we got some really great feedback and participation through those sharing opportunities as well. So Bridget, I'm going to toss it to you, and you're planning to share a little bit about how we analyzed and presented the data to help our partners in their decision making.
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. I'm going to share a few things that we presented at that December summit. The Chamber does do a summit every December, and they get about 300 to 500 people. So it's a pretty big crowd that they attract to that event. So I just wanted to show you a little bit about how we sort of presented the data and then talk a little bit about some of the successes or outcomes that we had from this project. So Jennifer, if you want to go to the next slide. One of the things that we were able to do as we're kind of sifting through all this data, and Jennifer and I are doing tabs and cross tabs and all sorts of things like that, is really come to some major conclusions. So none of these will be surprising to anyone who's been working in communities, but it was I thought, a good way to kind of summarize this data for the audience, right? So the general data pointed to just the negative impacts. We asked questions around revenue, employment, and also their supply chains to get an understanding of, how are those working? Are there issues there? So not surprising, again, all of those had negative impacts from COVID-19. We asked some questions similar to the first group about innovations and pivots and how that was playing out to try to begin to kind of understand what businesses were doing. And obviously a lot of them were doing things in that sphere. And then the other thing that kind of came out, especially since we had that iterative approach, is just that the recovery was going to be a little slower than we maybe thought. Businesses continually kept saying they were optimistic. But then when you looked at their employment plan, so we kind of asked them, where were you before the pandemic? Where are you now? And where do you think you're going to be 6 months from now? With each survey, that employment uptick kind of seems slower and slower. So business is optimistic, hiring maybe not quite as quick to recover. So if you want to go to the next slide, Jennifer. Then we were able to, using this data, we were really able to start doing some dissecting and really getting into some of the information for the community. So again, having that time series was really helpful. So we have July here on the left and September on the right. And that light brown color is the number of businesses that were operating at 90% capacity or above. So you can see the good news for our communities was we went from 28% in July to 40% in September. So definitely seeing businesses start to pick up and get back to their normal operating levels. However, even in September, we still had 60% of businesses in the Rochester area that were operating at below, capacity. And you can see we still had like 30% of businesses that were operating at less than 50%. So clearly still going to kind of be a little bit of a drag on the Rochester economy going forward. Jennifer, if you want to click through. And then we were able to, one of the questions we asked early on was, what industry are you in? So just to give an example of how we are able to kind of go deeper, we did a cross tab to just figure out like, how does that operational capacity vary by industry? You have to be a little careful because in some of those particular sectors, we only had a couple businesses respond. So you don't want to be like, this is the whole industry, but it does give you some insight. And the light green here is the businesses operating at 90% or more. And, obviously not surprising, manufacturing, construction, banking continue to really operate close to full levels. And then things like accommodations, retail, food service, much more likely to be operating at quite a bit lower level. And that corresponds with our governor's orders and our restraints that we had on businesses. But that was just an example of how we could take that data and really start to get deeper and deeper and deeper to help really inform the policy and the actions that communities were doing on that. So Jennifer, if you want to go to the next slide. So some of the things that we really found to be highlights of this project for us and for the community, we really felt like the businesses were being heard. So as I mentioned, we did that economic summit. So we had done 3 surveys, then we did the summit in December, and we saw quite a bit of an uptick, not a huge uptick, but an uptick in our response rate in that January survey. So kind of one of the things that I thought was like businesses came to that summit, they saw that the chamber was using this data, they saw that the chamber was talking about it and publicizing it, and so they wanted to be involved in that next survey. So I do think there are indications that the businesses really appreciated that their voice was being brought to the table and being brought, you know, not only at the chamber level, but also at the county level into the conversation. As Jennifer mentioned, we did write those questions with an eye to the Census Pulse survey that was out there, as well as the Federal Reserve survey. So we were really able to do some cool comparisons looking at that real local, you know, what's happening here in Rochester, and then being able to compare it to the state, the regional, and the national trends. And that provided some real key insights into where maybe Rochester was outperforming on certain things and areas where there was room more for improvement for Rochester. And then I really think the key here was just being able to provide a lot of insight during this period of uncertainty. Things were changing a lot, you know, and we even had, you know, we had that closure in March, then we kind of had some reopening over the summer, then we had another partial shutdown in November. And so the timing of these surveys really help people to be able to understand, you know, what's happening right now, where are businesses, what are some of the things that we can do to help them. And I think on the next slide, Jennifer, we have here a nice quote from our friend at the county, just talking about how much the county was able to capitalize on this information. So as you know, there was a lot of money that came out kind of from the CARES Act that had to be spent by the end of December of 2020, and communities were making really quick decisions. And our partner Wilfredo, he talked about how we were able to use that information. The county used that information to make decisions on how they were going to allot their funds. And if you see the quote there that he said, the survey series was instrumental in the success of their grant program for businesses and nonprofits. So I think we were just able to give some really great insights at a time when the community really needed it. Go to the next slide, Jennifer. Oh, I'm sorry. I had a couple more things on that last slide. I forgot. We can go back. So just a couple other things that were insights for or successes for us on kind of a selfish extension level. Rochester is one of our largest cities in outstate Minnesota. And as such, sometimes it is difficult to forge partnerships with Extension because there are a lot of other, you know, economic development entities in the region. So this was a really great opportunity to partner with 3 kind of large institutions and really be able to prove what Extension can do. And so I think it's going to lead to a lot more partnerships with them in the future. Again, that's kind of a selfish thing. But then on the kind of the business side, you know, there were a lot of myths floating around during that time period. So it was a good opportunity to be able to kind of use the survey data to either confirm some of the things that people were hearing, you know, they're hearing anecdotal stories, and being able to have data to either say, yep, you know, that kind of insight is supported by the data, or on the other side to say, you know, I know you heard that story, but the data really doesn't show that that's happening in our community. So it was a really good opportunity to do that. And then the final thing I think that's really exciting for us going forward is that we really were able to start to see some trends. And so, you know, with that time series, we're able to start to be able to make some predictions about where we think things are going to go. And I think that long-term has a lot of potential for Rochester. So we're hoping to, we're going to do, this is our last survey related to COVID, but we're hoping to set up kind of an annual business kind of pulse type survey with them going forward. So we'll be able to start to see how things are evolving in the economy and maybe be able to help point the chamber in the direction of where some changes might be coming as well. So that is the end of our presentation, but I saw a lot of questions coming up in the chat, Jennifer. I didn't read them, but.
I'm looking at them now. Let's see how the response rate changed over time. Yeah, so the first set, I think we had 300, and then we had, you know, it was like 200, then we had 300, and then we had in the 100s by the third survey when that was September when Bridget said we presented that results in December, and then we saw another uptick over 200 in January for that January response. And then how we managed the outreach to try to improve the response rate. So the outreach was really the responsibility of the partners, and so they were pushing it out to their mailing list directly. I think they did some specific emails, very tailored and targeted emails. So we weren't directly involved necessarily in the dissemination of the survey to the businesses. Bridget, do you have anything to add?
No, I agree with that. Just other to say that we, worked with them on their platforms to promote it. So you mentioned like the chamber newsletter, and we really worked to try to get the data to them so they could share it back out as well.
Mm-hmm.
Vikram has asked if you have a report on this study available.
That's a great question. Thank you for asking. We didn't actually publish a report. I can share what was put in the chamber newsletter. So that was essentially the summary report. We wrote that for the chamber to have in their newsletter or magazine, but we didn't do a big summary report that we made public. It was more these informal memo type reports for the clients. So yes, I can dig that up and send it out. Okay, Vikram, do you want to send me and just put your email in the chat, and I'll send it to you directly, because I'm not sure how else I can share it. I don't have it at my fingertips at the moment.
I'll go ahead and share my email as well, because I would be interested in that. So I'll pop it in the chat. And then, do we have any other questions?
Any feedback? I think I'd be also curious to hear if you have any feedback on our study approach, or anything you would have done differently, or maybe have done differently if you've done a similar study.
I'm actually curious in your work with the Chamber of Commerce and how you develop. Is that a long-lasting relationship that you have had to work with the Chamber of Commerce in that capacity, or how did you develop that relationship for this study?
Yeah, it's a relatively new relationship, I would say. We'd had some, they had a new chamber director start around the same time I started with Extension. So when I was doing my, you do your outreach to partners when you start a new position. And she was very intrigued by just the services that Extension provides for around this sort of, surveys and economic impact analysis. I think she wasn't aware of all the variety of ways that we can support their work and their efforts. So we'd had some initial conversations, but like I said, the pandemic, I think, accelerated or created some urgency around the work, and the investment was like, she could see the value, the return on the investment. Like, I need this information, so let's start to collaborate here. Bridget, do you have anything you want to add to that? I'm rambling.
No, other than, Rochester, Minnesota is home to the Mayo Health System, Mayo Clinic. And so I think what she liked about working with us is that we could sort of talk about some of the things beyond Mayo, right? Sometimes the conversation in that community is just Mayo, Mayo, Mayo. And so she really liked our ability to talk about small businesses, to talk about their experiences, and to bring some of that conversation forward. We had done a little bit of another project with them prior to this, looking at the economic impact of small businesses, so that they could start to have that conversation around how do we want to support Mayo, we want Mayo to grow. That obviously makes our community flourish, but we also have small businesses, and how do we support them, and how's the chamber a voice for those small businesses as well?
And Hannah has commented that she likes how you made it comparable to US Census Pulse and other surveys, so you could benchmark the city to other regions. And we actually did that in our survey too. We used some of the census questions and then some other questions that were tailored to more location specific. So that's the general comment in the chat in case you haven't seen it. Any other comments? Yeah, we managed to finish up early. I'm not sure how that occurred. I promise I kept track of time. So does anybody have any overall comments or questions or any information you would like from any of the presenters? You can pop that in the chat or contact those individuals directly. But before we officially close it down, any other comments?
Yeah, I guess I would. I run our economic impact analysis program in Minnesota, and I would be interested to see if there's anybody else who wants to get together and talk a little more about the middle presentation and like how we're gonna do economic impact work, even with loosening restrictions around COVID. I think expenditures are gonna look different, and if there's anybody who wants to have more of a conversation around that, I would love it.
How do you suggest we organize that? What would be the easiest way? Because I'd be interested in those conversations too, as I do different types of analysis. So is it easier to?
I don't know, maybe just throw out a date and like I can send out a Zoom to people that are like an invite to people that are here today.
That could work. Or, do some sort of, are you interested? Yeah. So I think that's a really good idea. I think we should do that. So. And you already have my email because it was in the chat. So we can do that, but we have that through the presenters. So anything else? Well, thank you, everybody. And Shannon, Shannon popped in some interest in the discussion to get another presentation. So she popped in another email. So I'll leave it open for a little bit so we can collect those emails of anybody who'd be interested in participating in that discussion or any other questions or comments you may have. And I will see everybody at the next session. Thank you for all your presentations and thank you for all the work that you do.